Welcome back to the Uncannery, everybody. I'm Dawn, and I'm here tonight with
Ron
and Doug.
Hey, it's us again.
It's us.
Yeah.
Very excited to be invited back. I didn't think you would keep me on the podcast this long.
We're still, I mean, there's still a vote.
That's right.
Yeah.
The draft is coming, I think.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Everybody listening, please vote in on your favorites.
Take out your Nokia.
Yeah, absolutely.
Type RON to 1-800.
We need that sponsorship from Nokia now.
That's right. Well, it does happen to be just the young days of the new year. So happy New Year to both of you. And thinking of the new year, I wanted to start tonight by talking
Apologizing.
Well, by asking about the passage of time. Have you ever, like when you were little, like before you had a concept of time, how did you measure your days or your events in your life? How did you?
So I definitely remember, I don't know if this was something just my family did or if other people did the same thing, but I would measure time frequently by the length of cartoon episodes. So if we had to go visit a family member and they were further away, we'd be like, how long will it take, Mom? And she'd say, like, it'll be 2 Rugrats episodes. And that was like, I could understand that. If she said, like, it'll be 45 minutes to an hour, I'd be like, I don't understand. But I can picture sitting in front of a TV for that amount of time.
And did you actually have Rugrats playing in the car on the way there?
No, we didn't have televisions and cars yet, I don't think.
Yeah.
But it was just like, that was how my brain understood the passage of time. It was immediate.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And does that mean, because Rugrats would often have 2 episodes inside of a single episode. So are we talking a storyline?
I want to say it was probably a full, like, 2 episode or 2 storyline block of Rugrats.
So it'd be 4. Well, if it's 2 episodes, 4 storylines.
That's true.
I mean, 1 episode of 2 storylines.
And it probably was your mom hedging on not knowing whether it was right. So
she was just like,
it could be anywhere from a half hour to 3 hours, and it would fit.
Exactly. And it, like you said, it is a unit of time that can be easily broken or extended into whatever past period you need.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to pull us completely off topic, I was really weirded out looking at, apparently they're trying to reboot Rugrats, or they have, but now it's all 3D kind of knockoff Pixar-ish type animation, and it
can't be.
I'm just old, but yeah, I couldn't do it.
At least it's not live action.
Yeah. The babies, they're CGI, their
It's
mouths
like
to
real
move.
adults, but CG babies. Like they're Scooby-Doo or something.
Just thinking about that. Oh. Mm-hmm. True pain.
So, Doug, how about you? Any special ways that you marked time?
Ways that I mark time. I think that I thought the thing that felt the longest when I was younger was maybe a school day. So probably thinking of how much time till recess, then lunch, then break, then leaving home. I mean, I think that's generally how I started to organize time, because I think before school, I don't think that I was thinking about that as much. I even remember when my mom and dad would ask me, like, okay, we'll do that in 5 minutes. I would be asking, has it been 5 minutes yet?
Yeah.
Within seconds of them saying that.
Before you go to school, that's a very like paradisical time, right? That's Eden, right? There is no sun and there is no moon, and
not at all.
all the world is a garden to be explored. And then you go to school and it's like, what are these structures humans have built?
Yeah.
I'm even trying to remember, like, I remember distinctly keeping track of time in high school, like how many minutes until this period is over.
Oh yeah.
But in elementary school, I really don't. Like, I don't remember paying that close of attention to a clock back then. Like, there were clocks. I know there were clocks in all the rooms, but I don't remember.
Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't think about good point. I didn't think about the clock. I just began to get a certain rhythm for it's going to be lunch in just a second. I feel it. And I was pretty right on most of the time. Yeah, so I think that I started to think about things in those types of increments, and I kind of remember asking parents, like, is it about the time from when school starts to lunch? And then they would give me an idea of what it would be. Yeah.
That's it's a good segue that you've just given us, talking about getting into a rhythm and just sort of, I think, intuiting how the passage of time and how, because what I'd like to talk about in this episode is the measurement of time and how we have come to rely on a system and how that system was sort of developed. So we want to get into our special Uncannery magic bus that we have, and go all the way back to the beginning of civilization.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
That was worth every penny we spent on that.
I know, right? And I want us to try to see if we can figure out how did we figure out to measure the passage of time? Like, measuring distance is one thing, because like we've got body parts that are all certain lengths, right? And you hold out your arms, and that's, how tall you are, and cubit is like from the
How
tip
tall
of
is
your
he?
finger
He's
to-
2.5 arms.
Well, but that's, I'm 6 foot. Like it's the same. Somebody's foot was that foot,
Right.
And that's how
Wow.
tall I am.
Find that guy.
Yeah.
Is that what we're doing today? We're gonna find the first foot.
But how? Well, yeah, but we're doing it with time. Like, how did we wind up with minutes and seconds and hours and days and months, and like all of those divisions are unusual because the passage of time, the way that the majority of humanity over the history of humanity has experienced the passage of time has only been through that intuition and rhythm. If you actually think about the thousands of years of the existence of the human species, but the amount of time we've been able to have a device in our household, even, that would be reliable enough to tell us, oh, it's 3:00, not 3:15. For most of human history, you would have no idea it was 3:00. It was still daytime. It was nighttime. Those were the two sort of divisions. And beyond that, it didn't matter, because if it was nighttime, I got to sleep, and if it was daytime, I had to go to work, and you don't have to work again until daytime again. And that was all that anybody had to care about. Right.
Right.
So how did we get from there to all of the complications that we have now? What do you think? Like, what would be the first thing? What would be the first rhythm that would get noticed, do you think?
Well, I feel like you mentioned it. It has to be the day, right? Like, it has to be, oh, this is the daytime, this is the nighttime. In the daytime, I work and I'm hot and I'm sweaty, and in the nighttime, the leopards come out, or
Saber-toothed tiger.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think about, this is coming back, the bus is coming back to Minecraft in today's world. But I think about that for the fact that it's so successful, that video game is so successful amongst all age groups. And I think it's because it drops you onto an island, and you have to figure out how to start constructing stuff before night happens, because night is when all of the baddies come out and whatnot. And I think, I've watched 3-year-olds play Minecraft before, and they intuitively understand, I have to get this done before this time.
She just loves life.
Indeed. All right. So then, so I agree. I think day and night is the most obvious rhythm that gets picked up. So then, what comes next? Like, if we're not, we're not administrators of government. We're just Joe Blow cavemen.
My favorite movie.
What rhythm's going to matter to us next? Like, what are we going to have to figure out?
We're hunter gatherers. Is that what we're thinking?
Yeah.
So you want to know when's the good time for the animals, right? Like when are the water buffalo going to be in the valley, and when are the other types of water buffalo going to be in the canyon?
So animal migration would matter, right? And the gathering part, it would be the seasons that would affect us. So we'd have to figure out, how can we how would we go about figuring out when those things would happen?
Is it too difficult to start creating like to start recognizing and recording patterns of weather, right? So I mean, you got, hey, this is the snowy time, this is the monsoon time, right? This would be so you'd be like, oh, usually around this time of year, this is when we can expect these sorts of things, and then that also probably ties in with the animals. But is that too big? Do we need to think smaller?
I don't think so. I mean, because we're, you know, in our magic bus, we're all the way back with hunter gatherer times. Like I think that's about right. But the thing that kind of weirds me out a little bit is we've grown up knowing that there's a cycle. We know that that when it's hot, you know, 6 months later it will be cold, and then 6 months later it will be hot, and we know physically that that's how it's going to work because of the physics of the gravitational pull of the sun and the solar system. But hunter gatherers, like, I wonder how long it was just a mystery. Like, you know, it's cold now. How much longer will it be cold? And you know, how long would it take to get a sense of that rhythm?
Right.
And can you pass that rhythm on to your children, or is that something that they have to experience for themselves? Because we can pass it on because we've got calendars and clocks and stuff like that. But when we don't have any way to record the passage of time, we're just experiencing the passage of time. Can you pass that on, or do you think that's something that just has to be experienced?
I think you can pass it on, but it's a crapshoot if the kids believe you or not.
Yeah.
So it's just like today.
Yeah. Trust me, there's gonna be
That stove is hot.
Yeah.
I told you.
It's hot again.
Yeah. I don't know. I wonder if my brain is going to, like, probably that starts to tie into like early mystical experiences or perceptions of nature spirits and things like that, right? Where it's like, it's freezing and terrible and all my cows are dead. I better start praying to anything to, you know, bring the spring. And you pray long enough and eventually the spring does arrive. You're like, wow, it worked. So maybe sort of religious tradition is a way to record and pass on that kind of information.
What about somebody has to be there that can figure out, and it's attached to those religious, I think, significance though, is there's a way we can figure out how long it's going to be before it gets cold and before it gets hot again. Like even the hunter gatherers could figure it out. Like,
I
what
got it.
What is it?
It's the good old moon.
Yeah.
Because the moon changes shape in the sky.
It does. It changes shape in the sky, and it does so in a very predictable way. And unfortunately, it's a super inconvenient amount of time. It's like 29.6 days or whatever is a cycle of the moon. But that's pretty close to a month. So that's that passage of time that we can figure out if we can count the number of moons until we get to summer, right? Or whatever we called summer back then it wouldn't be cold anymore. And then the moon's so the original, the way the time was counted was through the moon. But then how do we get from the moon to a year to then, of course, having to get to hours in a day? How many moons should there be in a year? How many would be convenient?
I do like the possibility of a world where we don't have these answers and we get to decide, and we're like, there are going to be 36 moons in a year, right? And then like a year just becomes this really long period of time or something. Like it could be the reign of a chieftain or something, right? Like that's a unit of human life, right? How long did this guy or something? But if you're thinking for like how do we find a rational or like a way to explain this to many people, I don't know. That's my answer.
Oh. Yeah. So let's not put Ron in charge of this.
And you're asking how, ask one more time.
How many moons in a year is the question.
Well, I feel like if you would follow the moons until you find a repeat in the pattern, right? So like eventually, winter would arrive again, right? So
I think that's why I'm having trouble with it is like they would know a year because it's been cold and hot a certain amount of times, and then they would divide that by moons. Is that what we're thinking?
we're trying to figure it out.
I wouldn't be in charge of weather.
Let's ask Joe Blow Caveman. Joe Blow Caveman, what do you make of all these moons?
Let's go to the hieroglyphics.
Moon, scary, pale white face of death and sky.
Well, because here's the problem. So the Babylonians figured this out, and they figured it out by about 500 BC. But the Babylonians started well before 500 BC. The Babylonians go all the way back to 1800 BC. So it took them some time to figure this out. But the lunar cycle, they could predict the start of the month on a 19-year cycle. So exactly 235 lunar months works out in the regular scheme. But that's like too long of a time to conceptualize. Like if we made a year the equivalent of 19 years, right? Like our brain wouldn't. Like that's not the way a cycle would work.
Yeah.
So they divided those that 19-year cycle up into 7 long years that had 13 months in them, and 12 short years that had 12 months in them. Mm-hmm. And so you had to wait for the astronomers to tell you every year whether it was going to be a long year or a short year. And then sometimes it had 12 months and sometimes it had 13 months, depending upon how many moons there were in the year, to try to keep us, in the ballpark of in time with the astronomical cycle of the Earth around the sun. And that happens to be also where our degrees come from too. That's why we have 360 degrees in a circle. This comes from the Babylonians counting the movement of the sun across the sky.
Wow.
Yeah. But they then decided to divide the Babylonians did the day into 12 equal parts. So sundown to sundown went 12 equal parts. So instead of 24, they were basically 2-hour parts. And those were called Beru. And then they divided the Beru into 30 equal sections called Us. So you had 360 Us in a day in a 24-hour period.
Yeah.
Which again is not quite our timekeeping, right? Yeah. But you can see the base 12 is in there, and the base 60 is in there. Both of those numbers are kind of odd, though. Like if you're going to start counting something, like most of us wouldn't choose, hey, let's count by 12s or let's count by 60s. Right. Any ideas why they would choose those weird numbers? Like we count things like we count eggs by 12s. We count
dozens.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a word for it.
Was it a passionate and unruly king? The whims of a passionate ruler?
The mad Babylonian king 12 wanted everything named after himself.
I've read this Christian Andersen tale.
Let's see. Yeah, I find it confusing because we usually count digits.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a big part of. So I would imagine that they'd be thinking of something, but I don't know what we have 12 of. All 10 fingers and 2 nipples. That's the only way. That's
everybody's got them.
Some people have more than 2.
The 13 is here.
That's how we got a baker's dozen.
That's baker. You knew what your job was going to be if you woke up with that. We're birthed third nipple. Yeah. He'll bake like crazy.
Actually, it's funny that you mentioned your fingers because that's so we do usually count by 10s because we've got 10 fingers. It's easy to count that way. But actually, this is one of the reasons that we have the 12 as the basis for some of the counting, as well as 60, because the Babylonians inherited from the Sumerians a numerical system that was base 60. So rather than base 10, it was base 60. And the way that they would count those, it was using the fingers. So usually we would count a single number on each digit.
Because the Sumerians were ancient aliens.
Now we're taking that's next podcast.
So as I was saying, usually we count on our fingers one number per digit. But if you take your non-dominant hand usually, and if you count with your thumb, and rather than counting your digits, count the space between your knuckles, like on your pinky finger. You'll have 1, 2, 3 on your pinky finger, 4, 5, 6 on your ring finger, 7, 8, 9 on your middle finger, 10, 11, 12 on your index finger. You can count a dozen with your hand. So apparently this is the way the Babylonians would count their, sheaves of wheat or eggs. So you can count a dozen. And then with your dominant hand, you have 5 fingers. You can keep track of those dozens, which 5 dozen would count 60. So that's
cool.
So
that's clever. We should still do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And if you were only Babylonian, you could.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've only been stuck on 10 the entire time.
I'm sorry what happened to you, Babylonians.
So that's actually what happened though with the way the calendar got invented. So you had this, they figured out that they could divide the sun's ecliptic arc into 12, and then they could divide those 12 pieces into 30 additional pieces, which is about a month, right? And that's how we wound up with the 360-day year, which of course put them out of phase a little bit with the astronomical cycle, but it wasn't that important back then. People didn't have paper calendars in their household that they were keeping track of days. They could just say, hey, at the end of the year, we need 5 more days in order to get back on track with the usually they were measuring from the spring equinox, and then they just would wait 5 days, and then they would say, now we're starting a new year. And it was fine because there was only a few thousand people and nobody had a calendar to like correct somebody and say, no, it's Thursday, because it wasn't Thursday. It just was another day I had to go to work.
That's really cool. So, imagine getting everyone on board with, hey, we're just throwing 5 more days on this one.
Right.
You can't even get on board with time zones.
No.
Again, people hate time zones.
Yeah, absolutely. Call you ahead.
So the Egyptians are credited with dividing the day into 24 hours instead of the 12. And I don't know how those two merged, but somehow those merged. So we had a 12-hour day. And the hours, though, were just a fractional division of the amount of sunlight in the day. So it wasn't a passage of 60 minutes. Like you couldn't have a stopwatch in ancient Egypt and say, oh, it's been an hour. You just would say, well, it's been 1/12 of the movement of the sun across the sky, which they would measure with a stick. So that would mean that your day was longer in the summertime than it was in the wintertime. So, but how would you get paid back then?
You said paid?
Paid, yeah. If you were a paid worker, how would you get paid?
Clamshells.
Yeah, right. Like a Flintstone.
Yeah.
You wouldn't get paid by the hour is the point. You get paid by the day.
Right.
So I would want to only work winter days because winter days are shorter.
That's right.
Right.
Of course, in Egypt, they don't change as much as they do in Northern Europe. But
right.
But anyways.
Would you get time and a half on a summer day?
Mm-hmm.
Is that where time and a half comes from?
It's not. No. But
get the bosses in here.
Then we have to move forward quite a bit of time before we actually get minutes being counted. So a minute is a 1/60th division of that hour, right? So we got an hour is 1/12 of a daytime or 1/12 of a nighttime. We would divide that into 60, mostly based because of that's how the Babylonians and Sumerians were dividing things. But the 60 was kept because of how fractional it is. So apparently the Babylonians and the Sumerians didn't have a concept of fractions. So you couldn't have a half of something, but you can divide 60 by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 without any fractions. The only number you can't divide by is 7. And the same is true for 360. So 7 kind of becomes this mystical, magical number that doesn't work, but all the other numbers do work. And they think that might be why 7 is one of the reasons it's been given sort of that mystical, magical reputation.
Yep.
Yeah. But then how many days did we wind up with in a week?
7.
Oh my gosh. Right. So like
It's weird.
the whole thing maps out just fine. Why do we have 7 days in a week though?
Because we got the 10 digits to count, and then we've got the knuckles. And so when you get fingers removed for doing bad things.
Yes. Let him cook. He's on it.
You better not. It's not going well.
Is it one of those holdovers? But I mean, like, it kind of works out, right? What's 7 times 4?
28.
8. So it kind of works into our 30-day approximate months that we've created. Right?
It's close to our 30-day month. It's closer to our 29 point some days lunar calendar as well, but it's still not perfect for either of those.
Right.
So the moon cycle keeps moving a little bit if we're counting by sevens. Oddly enough, the reason we have 7 days in a week seems to be because people liked it better. There was actually an 8-day week that was used by the Etruscans that the Romans inherited. And the 8-day week was used by ancient Rome. And it was a market system. And so the days of the week, the 8 days of the week they didn't have names. They just were lettered. So it was A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. And each little town would have market days on a different letter. So if you were a traveling marketeer, you would be able to have a circuit of like 8 little villages you could visit, and you would have a different market experience on each one of those days, and you could. So
that's a real small business minded society. They're really out there helping them out. Right.
Sorry, little Billy, you're not getting oranges until D.
That's right. That's right.
When does the orange man come, mommy?
But the Romans encountered a 7-day week from Egypt and others, and apparently people liked 7 days better because one of those days was a day without a market. So you had 6 days of market and then a day without a market for festivals and religious purposes, and then so we just sort of landed on 7.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can we do that again? Can we bring that back up for debate?
You bet. How many days?
Let's just try 6. I mean, I'm not to trying anything crazy, but 6 sounds okay.
How many work days in your 6-day week?
4, baby.
4, yeah, definitely 4. No, 3. I'm going hard.
Yeah.
3 on, 3 off. Would you go every other day, or would you go 3 in a block and 3 in a block?
I like 3 in a block. I'm kind of glad we work in a block. Because I want the block of time off, and then like I think you live really big, and you have big tragedy block of working. You got big joy block of not working.
Big tragedy.
Big tragedy, big joy. That's my new rap album.
We'll be plugging that at the end of the cast. It's good.
But then we needed to name them because A, B, C, D, E, F, they weren't very inventive names. That wasn't cool with everybody. So, so we needed to come up with names for the days of the week. Do you know what the days of the week are named after?
They're gods, right? At least, I mean, at least in English, many of them are like Norse gods.
Right. Thursday.
According to Neil Gaiman.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, you got Thor's Day. Wednesday's like Woden's Day, right?
It is,
And
right.
Friday, Freya or something.
Uh-huh.
And then Sunday is, everyone knows, the famous god Sun of the Norse pantheon. Saturday would be the famous Mr. Tubness.
Tubness Day. Narnia showed up. I was not expecting that.
Yeah. That's as far as I got.
You skipped Monday.
Yeah, Monday is the one that I'm going.
Moon? You got moon, you got sun. Is Saturday like Star Day or something like that?
Or the day to sit.
I sat on day.
The day of sitting, my favorite.
Tuesday. We missed Tuesday.
Is very strange.
Oh, Tyr. Tyr is a Norse god.
Tyr?
Does he come from that
That's
one?
Tyr's Day.
Tears Day.
Tears Day.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
You're grinning like you know.
I do.
Like
He
you're
does.
grinning like a man watching apes dawn.
Well, think about my response earlier. No, apes would probably be more articulate.
Well, you're right. They're named after gods, and they were named after the Babylonian gods actually originally, because the Babylonians had that 7-day week that the Etruscans messed up. But so they named the days of the week after their 7 favorite gods, and then the Greeks took those and just changed the names to their 7 gods, and then the Romans took those and just changed the names to the Latin gods. So in most languages, so in Spanish and French, you can see the names of the Latin god names there. So, for example, Miércoles in Spanish is named after the god Mercury, who's the messenger god. When the Anglo-Saxons encountered the Romans, they basically said, hey, the 7-day week thing is kind of cool. You got a way to count that, but we don't have Mercury as a god. We have Woden, who was, of course, the head god in the Norse and Anglo-Saxon pantheon, but he also was a messenger. He would deliver a message. So Wednesday became it was Woden's day, like you pointed out. Thursday does come from Thor. In the Latin, that's Jueves in Spanish, rather, which is Jove. So it's for Jupiter, who was the god of thunder in Greek, and then. So rather than taking the head god and making it the head god, we just took the thunder part of it.
Curious coincidence, almost like the gods were given to us by an ancient species of extraplanar beings.
It's funny you should mention that. I just saw actually a post that had a picture of the oldest pair of socks that exist in the world that apparently were produced in Egypt in the 5th century, and they just have 2 toes in them, like 2 equal piece, like, so it's
very strange.
Indeed, it seems to be
They're out there.
yeah, they
Don't buy the official narrative, people.
I want to believe.
Buy my book.
All right, so do you know Spanish or French? Do you know what Friday is?
I used to.
Definitely took German. Oops.
Freitag.
Yep, Freitag. Sehr good.
So Friday is Viernes.
Yes. Which is similar to spring?
It is. Yeah. It's Venus is the Latin god. So it's the only day of the week named after, well, it's not true. It's a day of the week named after a goddess of beauty. So it's named after a female god. And so the female god in the Anglo-Saxon is Freya, which is, so it's Freya's day. Saturday, you guys don't know who Saturday is named after?
Saturn?
Oh, of course.
It is Saturn.
Hoary old Saturn with his great white beard.
Who is the father of Jupiter. And the Anglo-Saxons didn't have anybody. So they're like, well, we'll just keep the name. So Saturday is named after the Roman god Saturn. But the others, they switched over to Anglo-Saxon. So, in Latin, now in Spanish, the Sunday is named after the holy day, the Domingo, but it is named after the sun. Monday is named after the moon. There's so where do we get the name of the moon from? Might be from a goddess named Mona, who was a goddess of the moon. And Tuesday is named after Tu, who is a brother of Tyr, I think.
Okay.
Tu is the god of war. But so the positions, like the positions of the days of the week all line up. So Tu is the god of war for the Anglo-Saxons, which is Martis in the Latin, which is for Mars, the god of war. The days of the week all come from the pantheon, but it's actually they named each hour of the day after each one of those gods. So the day was named after the god of the first hour of the day. And because there's 7 of them and we've got 24 hours in a day, when you put that together, every day moves 3 gods over. And so we wind up with 7 different gods, luckily, over that pattern. but I don't know what they did with that knowledge. Like, why would you know? Like at 10 o'clock, it's Venus time. Like, I don't know. Like,
it's Venus time.
Sure is in my house.
Going back to German, I feel like they kind of had to figure. Like Wednesday is Mittwoch,
the day of the middle folk.
Yeah, middle of the week.
Oh.
Couldn't have been easier. They knew what they were doing. But then it gets weird. Like Dienstag is Tuesday. I don't understand.
Dienstag.
Yeah.
Who's Dean? What's it mean?
Yeah.
Don't know. The Tag is always day, but yeah, I don't have anything for Deans, so I got carried away with Wednesday.
All right, so then we need to divide our hours down into to smaller pieces, and what do we divide them into?
Minutes.
Yeah, and then minutes are divided into
seconds.
This we know.
Don't do milliseconds though. That's where it gets weird. Why do we switch back?
So the division of the hour into 60 minutes. The what does minute mean?
Well,
you guys both have studied English before, yeah?
I used to use this word and people looked at me like this is not a word, but it is. Minute, right? Mm-hmm. Is like a small thing.
It is. And a minute is a small part of an hour, and that's actually where that comes from. It's and it's another pattern that people don't pay attention to, but actually the way that you place the emphasis in the word changes it from an adjective to a noun or vice versa.
Yeah.
So minute is the adjective meaning small, and then if we wanted to make it a noun, we would change it to a minute. Same thing you do with produce and produce. So
it always gets the blue squigglies in Microsoft Word.
Minute does?
Minute. Yeah, they don't like you using minute. They're like, that's not right. That's not right.
Computers take over the world, I guess. Well,
yeah, Grammarly.
I think they shrink the vocabulary.
They do.
Yeah, they do.
So the official Latin name for it is pars minuta prima, the very first small part. And that actually is important because if we divide it into 60 small parts, then we're going to divide each of those small parts into a further 60 small parts. Those would be our seconds. That would be pars minuta secunda, which is where our second comes from. So nice. Why minutes are called minutes because they're small, and seconds are called seconds because they're
the second small part.
The second small part.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Why do education is so designed to just make you remember things? Like when you're probably someone's teacher was cool and taught them this stuff, but like when you're a kid, it's just like I just need you to understand that there are 60 seconds in a minute.
Right?
Like who cares what any of these words mean? Just know that. But
full circle, going back to that conversation of how I started to look at time, I think it's because systematically, right? You're in situations where it's like, I need you to have the base level of knowledge that all of us do so you can just interact. And so a lot of that fun stuff gets in the way. Because at 5, I think you just want to play, but you also need to learn what seconds are.
You're right.
So you're not going to get the fun
stuff.
At
5, I'm like, who's Miraculous?
I'm not even hearing that word. I'm just thinking about recess.
I still want to know who Dean is.
Yeah.
And why did he get a whole day?
Yeah.
Poor Dean. Yeah.
But I mean, it's a good point because and I think it's a point that's relevant because it goes to like the whole new math and and now the Common Core has come in and is trying to change things again, and we're not students are not being taught times tables because that's just memorization. They want to be able to do the mathematical reasoning to arrive at what those solutions are. So which is the more relevant? Should you just know the fact, or do you need to know the history of where the fact came from? Is it?
I mean, the first one's definitely most relevant, right? Like just have the fact, right? Because that's the information you need to draw to mind. But I feel like the second is maybe this is maybe dumb, but like I feel like if you arm someone with the knowledge of where it all comes from, that's how you start to engender like intellectual curiosity, right?
Yeah,
I feel, and that's like it's like a teach a man to fish or give him a fish sort of situation.
I for sure do not retain things without the second part. The second part, if I can understand how it fits into the lore, or that's when I become ingrained, or it becomes engrossing for me. Of like, I would like to know about that now because I see how it's part of a larger thing.
And I agree with that. Like it's one of the reasons why etymology of words is so interesting to me, because it helps me remember new vocabulary. Except for the Deentog, which apparently I don't get to ever know.
That's the Germans.
And like etymology, you start to realize like how much of our knowledge is based on things that no one really understands anymore. Like it's so far removed, right? Like we think of like, oh, the ancient world, those Babylonians, sure, maybe they existed, right? But the fact that we're like still like they're sort of base level systems still are integrated into our daily lives in such a degree, and we don't even recognize or know that. Says a lot about like how knowledge passes through generations, right? And like what is kept. Like, yeah, it was useful. What? Why? That's not important,
right? And that's what's crazy to me is because literally like 3,000 years ago, Bob the Babylonian said, "Hey,
Joe Blow,
let's count." That was the caveman.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Later, man.
Let's count by 60, and now we still are.
Yeah.
But nobody knows. No, well, like it's impossible to know who Bob the Babylonian actually was that came up with that idea. But like, how does that last 3,000 years?
Right.
And people can't remember. I don't know what
last week's meme.
Exactly. Yeah. Like everything now seems to be moving so fast. So yeah.
And I used to actually, as a kid, always hate that it was 60. That like an hour was 60 minutes and a minute was 60 seconds. I was like, why? Why can't it just be 100? That everything, money's 100.
Money's 100. So you're a milliseconds guy. Got it.
Which is an innovation in British money, of course, like just before our lifetimes, right? In the early 1970s, they moved from old British money to the decimal system that the American money has been using. But what do you think? What do you think about decimal time? Like, would that solve a lot of our problems if we had 100 minutes in an hour? And we would have 10 hours in a day.
I can't make a real argument against it just because it's so ingrained in me. Like, I'm not 8 anymore. So like I don't. Yeah. I've dropped my qualm with time.
Right.
But no, I don't think it actually adds anything, right? Like the base idea that 100 is such a beautiful, easy, divisible number is, I think, again, related to our anatomy, right? It's like, well, because we stare at these, 2 groups of 5 digits all day. So we're just sort of like, our brains are programmed to think of that as easily. But I don't see why it's any harder now that if you just look at your hands in a different way, right? Like we're using the spaces between the knuckles, the same kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Count Doug's nipples. We can.
I'll tell you, I'm not a baker.
Because there have been attempts to improve both timekeeping and calendar design by making it a decimal system. Mm-hmm. And decimal time does exist today in certain computer applications.
Yeah.
But they're also like what's strange about those decimal times, like I don't understand the particular purpose that they serve in the computer world, but a lot of them are based off just like Bob's birthday from 1973. Like they all count from a particular event that happened in the past, and they just are counting the number of minutes since that event happened.
Yeah.
But the French Revolution actually tried to improve on the calendar keeping and timekeeping. And if you think about it, well, what was, so this is a test you guys weren't warned was coming. What was the purpose of the French Revolution? What were they trying to improve in general overall?
We're not loving the aristocracy. Let's just start there.
Yeah. Don't like them. Don't like their clergy friends either.
No.
The first 2 estates, right? So and the first estate, the clergy friends, they're all in charge of the religious stuff. And we just talked about all the days of the week being named after
clergy stuff.
Right.
Well, after gods, right? And granted, they're gods that the clergy in the French Revolution would for sure have said were pagan, yet we're still using them. Even today, they still use them. But we needed to find a way to remove all of those religious references. And what's the purpose of an annual calendar?
To record history.
And to keep track of festival days.
Oh, yeah.
Because where does our current calendar, like who was in charge of developing our current calendar?
Church.
It was. And the whole purpose of the church developing a process of the calendar was to find the day of Easter, actually, was the original goal of the development of the AD BC time system in the 6th century. So all of that in the French Revolution, if we're purist in, trying to eliminate all influence of religion on our society, which was one of their goals, we have to completely redo everything because the whole calendar is based on religious festivals, like the placement of Christmas, the placement of Easter, saints' days, the names of the days of the week are all. So they basically just like went blank slate and started over. So think metric system. How many days you're going to have in a week?
10.
Yeah.
10 days in a week.
That's not going to fly, is it?
How many? Well, it depends. How many work days would you have?
Oh, 5. Easy.
So basically, you have work week, non-work week. Yeah.
They went 9.
What?
So you got 9 work days, and then you have 1 day off that was not a work day. But of course, it replaced Sunday, but it wasn't really Sunday because Sunday would have been a religious day. It just was a non-work day. So how many
people like I think I do? They probably didn't like this very much.
Well, I wonder, like again, like every day, I know, Frere Jacques, a peasant in the street, like, did they even know what day it was? Like the only reason they would know is because somebody at church told them today's Christmas or whatever. Like they didn't ever have a reason to, I wouldn't think, the majority of them. Right. Merchants and things like that have shipments and things like that. Of course they would have, but the general population, I wonder if they would have. So they've got a 10-day week. So how many days are we going to have in a month?
30.
So yeah, we got 3 weeks in a month. So that sounds better.
Sure. Yeah.
3 weeks in a month. How many months in a year?
12.
There are. Yeah. I don't know why, because it doesn't fit the whole metric system.
Can't go around changing everything too fast, right? People will
lose their minds. That's enough. I think that people would.
Yeah. And so we have 30 hours in a day too, or
we'll get to that. So let's get the calendar worked out first. So we got 12 months of 30 days. That's. Do we need to do the new math?
I'm sorry. 360?
360. So we're going to be short
5 days.
5 days.
We're back in Babylon times.
We are. So we're going to add those 5 days at the end of the year. And those are going to be the only holidays we get all year.
All next to each other?
Uh-huh.
It's like having your birthday on Christmas.
Yeah. Well, and they're all smushed together. They all happen at the same time. And the whole purpose is to get us back on track with the movement of the sun across the sky.
People would be going wild. Like absolutely nuts.
Those are your purge days.
Oh yeah.
Those 5 days that don't exist.
Yeah.
Well, and they place them in September as well. They I'm trying to remember what they started. It was like the September massacres was the day that they started counting from. It was like September 22nd. So like you'd get the middle of September, you get 5 days off, and that would be your only break from work for the whole year. But all right, so let's come back to the day then.
Yeah.
So how many hours in a day? If we're going to, again, thinking metric system, like it's not metric system, but thinking
maybe
that
20, maybe 25.
25. That seems more round to you than 24.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we're staying decimal.
Yeah.
20, maybe back to 20.
Yeah. They chose 10.
Ooh.
Yeah. Which means that an hour is like 3 hours long. Like our sense
Right.
of 3 hours would be how long an hour is, because they had 10 hours divided into 100 decimal minutes. And each decimal minute was divided into 100 decimal seconds. So the actual count, like one decimal hour is 144 conventional minutes. So it's like 2 hours and a half or so.
It's a lot of Rugrats episodes.
Too many.
Like it would just seems like it would make the day go so slow, right?
Yeah.
Like looking
Yeah.
at the clock, like it would take forever for it to move, even the tiniest little bit.
Yeah.
There you go. Not surprisingly, as you pointed out, this was not super popular. It only lasted about 8 years, and then they
8 whole years. That's
a long time.
decided to pull it off. They had to change the names of everything too. Getting back to the calendar, they didn't want to name any of the months after any of the things that. We never talked about this, did
No.
we? What are our month names?
Some of
come
it, they're
from?
like very Roman, right?
July.
July is Julius, and
Yep.
August is Augustus, and September is famous Septembrus, the traitor.
December's kind of confusing.
Oh,
'cause that's 12.
Sept is a numerical, right? 7.
Sept is 7.
So, but it's not the 7th month.
It's not.
Oh, they screwed it up somewhere.
September, October does make sense though.
Yeah, 8. November is November.
But yeah, then
90.
they skip, and then we're in December, which is 10 again.
December is 10 again.
Yeah.
That's true, but it's the 12th month.
It gets weird.
Holy cow. What about January?
January.
I feel like I know. I want to know. I don't know.
January is Janus.
Oh, yeah. There he is.
And February?
Fabius.
They don't know. February,
really?
February is a mystery.
Lost the time.
Yeah, there's a possible festival of forgiveness that occurred that may have had a name similar to February, but it's
February is
kind
when you give up those
of a
grudges.
mystery one. March.
The Ides.
Yeah, big-eyed time. Mark?
All the months had an Ides though.
I know, but March.
March, the Ides were it was important.
Particularly potent.
True. But what was March named after?
I got either Mars or Mark was a big name back then.
Mars.
Okay.
Yeah. April's Aprilis, which is a springtime goddess. May is Maya. And June is probably Juno. Okay.
Makes sense.
And Julius, as you point out, is Julius Caesar, and Augustus was Augustus Caesar.
Those must have replaced prior months, right?
Oh.
They did. Julius replaced Quintilius, and
Poor Quinn.
and Sextilius for August. So, but you've already kind of landed on something important about the way that we number the months, because September is the 9th month of our year, but September means
7,
7th month, October
8,
November 9, and December is
Big 10.
Big 10. Yeah.
So we squeezed him in.
How do we get them off? How do we get off counting? If you've been listening
got
carefully, I gave you the answer
Yeah.
earlier tonight.
I haven't been, but here's
early
my guess. Julius didn't want his month happening in the winter. So he went and they shoved his
moved it
in
2 months
August.
over?
Yeah, and they moved everything back.
I could see him doing that.
Yeah.
That fits the profile for sure. But that's not what happened.
You told us.
I did.
What did you tell us, Doug? Doug, consult your notes, please.
Let me see here. Drawing a blank, quite literally.
What is the first day of the year?
January 1st.
Now it is January 1st. But if we go all the way back in time, we need something. Because January 1st has no astronomical marker on it. So we don't have a way to say it's January 1st.
Oh, did we start the calendar at spring?
We did. What's the marker? What's the astronomical marker?
Oh, the equinox?
So March was our first month. If you count from March, then September is the 7th month,
Right.
and July is the 5th month, quintilis. So all of the numbers work out fine if you count from March. Because originally, prior to Julius Caesar getting his hands on it, the Romans were doing the same thing that the Etruscans were doing, where they would have 10 months, and then they would have like winter.
Yeah.
So between December and the first day of spring was just like dead time. They didn't have a name for it. They didn't count the months. It was the year is over, and now we're waiting for the astronomers to tell us that it's the spring equinox, and we would start again. And the Romans actually would count from the start of the new moon, and they would count the number of days prior to. So the way they would express the date would be, it's like 6 days before the new moon in March. Like, it's super. You can think Roman numerals are confusing. Roman calendaring would have been even worse. Yeah. But that's where our names of the months comes from. So we're still recognizing the Roman gods and a couple of Caesars thrown in there. But the French Revolution, of course, we're trying to get rid of all religious references. So they named their months after the quality of the time of year. So they had vintage. Of course, they would say it in French, but vintage, cold, and frost. They would have snowy, rainy, and windy. Their springtime months were flowery and meadow. So they all were sort of.
I'm born in meadow.
That's right.
Can you imagine being born in windy?
I think I had an aunt who was born in windy. So
I think I had one who should have been.
Oh, no names here, huh?
The British, of course, got a hold of that, though. So the British, of course, got a hold of the names, and they came up with their own parody names. So British would call it Wheezy, Sneezy, and Freezy, Slippy, Drippy, and Nippy, Showery, Flowery, Bowery, and then Hoppy, Croppy, and Poppy.
All 12 dwarves.
That's right.
Those biting British satirists, you can't escape them.
Right.
Yep.
No matter what you do, right? Always around the corner. So, all right. So, what would we do to make time better? The measurement of time.
Freeze it. Stop it. It's a very fun kind of question, because when you started talking about how the French tried to change their day and their calendar, and you said 10 days in a week, my heart sank, and so that, I think, how you react to that kind of a thing tells you a lot about how much we feel about time, and how time isn't really just it's not just a rational, calculated, necessary measurement, right? But we have a lot of emotional stakes tied into the way we think about time, right? So do you want the day to move fast? Do you want it to move slow? By speeding down an hour, maybe time's really flying, but then you have more hours in a day. I'm trying to think back, when you were saying, Doug, as a kid, right? You're a kid. What do you want time to be? And I don't know if it really matters, right? Hey, you got 4 hours until lunch. Is that different from 2 hours because you've reduced the minutes in an hour? As a kid, does that sound better? Does that sound worse?
Well, I think of the fact that you literally described the time before knowing what time is as Eden as a child. Yeah. I mean, that tells you everything. I suppose thinking about time, everything is based on efficiency, isn't it? I mean, realistically,
I frequently have, connotations of efficiency tied to time. I measure how effective or productive I am being based on the amount of time something took, an activity took, right?
And even every society mentioned, we're looking at, these are market days, these festival days. We're eliminating this because we're creating a new system that is even identifying the way that we're doing things so we can be more efficient. And then French Revolution, it's about how many work days and then days off that you have. So it seems that almost every construction of time is based on the efficiency of times that you should be working and resting, in a sense. So making time better, I guess the next question would be, like in terms of overall happiness, or because I think moving away from that would be the greatest way to do that. But
and that's what I'm wondering. If going back to the idea that for the majority of human history, people haven't been keeping time the way that we do in our culture, right? There's records from ancient Roman times of the Romans would name their years after whoever was the consul administratively, but the person in the street, like they wouldn't have a reason to say, oh, it's the first, the fourth year of Marcus Aurelius or anything. Like it just wouldn't matter. They would mark it from important events, like, oh, it's the fourth year from the Great Famine, or it's the fourth year from the major earthquake, or right. There would be these important markers in their lives that then became the delineator of time, as opposed to this arbitrary measure of, progress. Right.
And I think it's still actually that way.
It is.
Like when I think about time, I can't tell you what happened in 2011, but I do mark, major, like I mark the relationship of myself and other things to major milestones in my life. So like in 2011, I did graduate. So like that's things that happened after I graduated is like easy for me to figure out, what was going on there. And like the COVID-19 pandemic has been the latest big cultural, it's been X years since then, right? I was just going to say people, I've thought a lot about this recently. People now say it was COVID. Yeah.
Which is like, that's not even a sentence that makes sense if we're talking about time, but people call it that because it's
a new epic.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
I had a moment tonight where I actually earlier before you guys came to do the podcast tonight, where I was at an event that I've been a work event that I've been doing for a number of years, and what I realized tonight was that I have almost been doing it for half of my entire life. That was one of those moments that I'd never thought about it in that term before, right? Yeah. I agree with you. I think there's major moments in my life that kind of like mark new starts of a period of my life. And I've never thought of it though, in terms of a fraction of my entire life,
right?
The way that it struck me tonight. And it didn't make me happy to think of it that way. Actually, it was rather foreboding,
because it depends on which side of that, of that calendar, if you will, you're on, right? Like, yep. I think we were talking once, and you were like, when you're a kid, it's November, it's September, because that means it's almost Christmas time, right? And how, like, oh my gosh, it takes forever to get to Christmas, and the anticipation of every Christmas, and Christmas is it may as well be 3 months long in your head. And now at 34,
it is 3 months long because it starts in August.
Yeah, we fixed that, but now at 34, it's like, oh, it's Christmas, and it flies by, and it doesn't have the same impact. And you correctly pointed out, Dawn, to me, that the reason this is because. Do you remember?
I do. I was wondering if you're
no. I want you.
Yeah, and it wasn't me that found it. It's a research study, so it's officially somehow determined, but it has to do with the fraction of your life that it is.
Yeah.
Right. When you're 5 years old, next Christmas is 20% of your life away.
Right.
That takes forever to get there.
Right.
I'm 50 years old. Christmas is 2% of my life until we get to the next one. Like it'll be here tomorrow.
Yeah.
So it's it all moves much more quickly than I think we want it to.
And I think there are times where we choose to be cognizant of time as it is kept, and then we forget it entirely. And for me, it's every day when I'm at work, I know exactly what time it is. And as soon as I get home, you look at the clock, oh my God, it's 9:45, right? Like you've completely, you no longer are ruled by time in that way. And I think that goes back to your thing, Doug, which is because particularly telling time during the day is an invention of a society that works, right? And is paid by the hour and has to produce by the hour, and et cetera.
Right.
And when I'm not doing that, I don't care what time it is, as long as I have more of it, so I can keep doing fun stuff on my own, right?
Yeah. The expression "time flies when you're having fun" goes, kind of outlines that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both for a good discussion about the passage of time. Next time that I will be hosting, so it won't be the next time that our listeners are listening, but the next time around, I'm going to monkey wrench this. So I hope that you all enjoy your calm sense of existential time right now, because we'll see what happens next.
Okay, I'm excited. I'm open to exploring new perceptions of time and new feelings about it. Thank you so much, Don, for bringing this to our attention. I'm a much wiser person now.
All right, thanks. Join us next time.
Thanks.